What does this little guy have to do with this grinning ghost? Are all these cuddly Ewoks related to these ghastly goblins? And how did Anakin Skywalker launch his N1 starfighter out of Hogwarts Castle and into space? These are all the Star Wars actors and crew in Harry Potter. The Star Wars universe and the wizarding world of Harry Potter have a lot in common. Brave heroes battling against iconic villains, fantastical creatures in spellbinding locations, big theme park energy, and a relentless belief in the power of good to overcome evil, with a little magical help. But there's more than that. On screen and behind the scenes, we've found a whole galaxy of connections between these two beloved franchises. For instance, let's go back to Babu Frick. We first met him in 2019's Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. The Anzellan droidsmith is obviously a digital character, but his unique voice comes from the very human Shirley Henderson. Shirley not only voiced Babu Frick, 4 years later, she was a whole crew of Anzellans on the 3rd season of The Mandalorian.
Bad baby.
But while we don't see her in Star Wars, a whole generation of fans will forever remember Shirley as that low self-esteem ghost who lives in the pipes, moaning Myrtle. She first appeared in 2002's Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, then popped up again 3 years later in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, awkwardly watching Harry take a bath. Does Hogwarts have HR? Goblet of Fire was also the movie where we first encountered the nefarious villain Barty Crouch Jr., played by a then up-and-coming British actor named David Tennant, who soon skyrocketed to fame as the 10th and then 14th Doctor Who. Marvel fans should know him as the creepy Kilgrave on Jessica Jones, but fans might not realize that David Tennant has an equally successful voice acting career, including prominent roles in the How to Train Your Dragon, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and DuckTales franchises.
I'm Scrooge McDuck!
But to Star Wars fans, David Tennant will always be the voice of Hu Yang, the professor droid who for hundreds of years taught Jedi history and the art of building lightsabers.
Many years I have been on this ship, teaching many a Jedi before you.
We first met Hu Yang in 2012, during Season 5 of Clone Wars, when he worked with Ahsoka Tano. It took another 11 years, but somehow, Hu Yang returned, this time in a live-action format, reuniting with his former pupil as a series regular on Ahsoka. And then again the next year, for a Season 2 episode of Disney's animated Young Jedi Adventures. For the record, we like this wise old droid a lot better than this dark young Death Eater. General Hux. He was a fearsome leader of the First Order who made his mark with a chilling speech in 2015's Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens, and continued to grandstand in 2017's Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi, before surprising us in The Rise of Skywalker.
What? You?
Ultimately becoming one of the most prominent bad guys in the sequel trilogy. But a decade before Star Wars, actor Donald Gleason was a young hero on the side of the good guys. He was Bill Weasley, the eldest of the 7 Weasley siblings in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1 and Part 2, following in the famous footsteps of his father, Brendan Gleeson, the Harry Potter veteran who played the memorable Mad-Eye Moody. Still, somehow I don't think Fleur Delacour would have married Bill if she knew what he would become. But long before General Hux, there was General Veers, who led the Empire's incredible attack on Hoth in 1980's Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. Veers was played by Julian Glover, the distinguished actor recognized more recently for his long-running role on Game of Thrones, and perhaps best known as the villainous Walter Donovan in Star Wars creator George Lucas's classic Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. But 22 years after Empire, Julian Glover played another legendary character, even though many of his fans never knew it. He was the voice of Aragog, the giant spider in Harry Potter Potter and the Chamber of Secrets.
Hagrid never opened the Chamber of Secrets.
Speaking of British bad guys, Jason Isaacs. Don't recognize him yet? How about now? That's right, Lucius Malfoy, infamous father of Hogwarts' #1 bully, confirmed Death Eater, and all-around nasty dude. We first encounter Lucius in the second Potter film, The Chamber of Secrets, and he doesn't get any nicer after that, coming back for the Goblet of Fire and the Order of the Phoenix, then showing up ever so briefly in this Daily Prophet article in the Half-Blood Prince, and finally back for his big finish in Deathly Hallows Parts 1 and 2. Star Trek fans know Isaacs as Captain Lorca on the first season of Discovery, and animation fans know his voice from a slew of great characters, including Zhao on Avatar: The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra, Ra's al Ghul in Batman Under the Red Hood, the Emperor on Dark Crystal Age of Resistance, and of course his greatest ever voice role, the Inquisitor, later known as the Grand Inquisitor, on Season 1 of the much-loved series Star Wars Rebels. Isaacs recently reprised the character on an episode of Tales of the Empire. Yeah, I'm not surprised that this voice
Do you really think you can save the boy?
comes from this actor. Nymphadora Tonks.
Don't call me Nymphadora.
Yeah, okay, Tonks wasn't introduced until Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, which was movie number 5, but she soon became a fan favorite, and came back for the Half-Blood Prince and both Deathly Hallows. Tonks was played by Natalia Tena, recently seen as Katya in John Wick Chapter 4. Before that, she played Osha. No, not that Osha, this Osha, the one who was on the first 3 seasons of Game of Thrones. But sharp-eyed viewers of The Mandalorian might have spotted Natalia Tena as Shion, the Twi'lek badass from the Season 1 classic, The Prisoner.
Hello, Mando.
Shion.
Yup, that's Tonks. One of the oldest and most complex relationships in the wizarding world is explored in the Harry Potter offshoot movies Fantastic Beasts. It's these guys, and they're both played by Star Wars actors. Yes, we're talking about best frenemies Albus Dumbledore and Gellert Grindelwald. That's the young Dumbledore, of course. The old wizard was masterfully played by Richard Harris and Michael Gambon in the original Harry Potter films. But in the second Fantastic Beasts movie, The Crimes of Grindelwald, the role of a far younger Dumbledore was played by a major movie leading man, Jude Law. Law's got a lot of huge characters on his resume, including playing Watson in the Sherlock Holmes movies, Captain Hook in the recent Peter Pan and Wendy, and this deceitful jerk in Captain Marvel. But Jude Law recently took his first step into a larger world, playing the mysterious Jod Nanowad on Skeleton Crew. And by the way, on episodes 5 and 6 of Skeleton Crew, when Jude Law's character meets up with bounty hunter Pocket, that's accomplished actress Kelly MacDonald, who played the Grey Lady herself, Helena Ravenclaw, in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. Okay, but what about the other guy in this duel, Grindelwald? Well, in the third Fantastic Beasts movie, The Secrets of Dumbledore, not only did Jude Law return as the title character, but the role of the dark wizard Grindelwald was taken over by acclaimed actor Mads Mikkelsen. Mikkelsen usually plays a bad guy. You've seen him being evil in Doctor Strange, recent Lucasfilm blockbuster Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, the James Bond thriller Casino Royale, and as the chilling title character in the TV series Hannibal. But in the Star Wars universe, he actually plays a good guy. He's Galen Erso, father of Jyn Erso, the man who helps design and then plant the seeds to destroy the Death Star in Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. And now here's one of the biggest connections between Star Wars and Harry Potter, Warwick Davis. He might be most recognizable as the title character in George Lucas's 1988 fantasy epic, Willow. and the 2022 follow-up Willow TV series. He's not very recognizable for his roles in Lucas's Labyrinth, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, The Chronicles of Narnia, Prince Caspian, or the Leprechaun movies, in which he played the murderous leprechaun in all 6 films, including our favorite, Leprechaun in Space. But of course, Warwick Davis is probably best known as one of the true heroes of Star Wars and Harry Potter, having played multiple characters in nearly all the movies. He made his film debut at just 11 years old, taking on the part of Wicket, the most prominent of all the Ewoks, and Princess Leia's pal in 1983's Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. Warwick returned as Wicket in the 2 made-for-TV Ewok movies, 1984's Caravan of Courage and Ewok Adventure, and 1985's Ewoks, The Battle for Endor. 34 years later, Warwick made his triumphant return as Wicket alongside his son, Harrison Davis, in The Rise of Skywalker. But
that isn't the half of it.
Warwick Davis also played Anakin's Rodian buddy Wald in 1999's Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Wolavan, a scavenger who hangs out at Maz Kanata's castle in The Force Awakens, and Wadabin, a gambler at the casino on Canto Bight in The Last Jedi. And we're still not done. Warwick was unmasked as Weasel, who went from watching the pod race with Watto in The Phantom Menace to fighting for freedom with Enfys Nest in 2018's Solo. Between those 2 movies, Warwick played Weeteef Kyubi, a supporter of Saw Gerrera in Rogue One, and Kedpin Shoklop, who appeared in a deleted scene from The Last Jedi. Warwick played 3 droids in Solo, DDBD, W1EG5, and WG22, as well as Wizich Mazur, a Cyclorian who joined the Resistance in The Rise of Skywalker. Not only that, but Warwick also donned a Yoda costume so the Jedi Master could be seen walking for just 1 shot in The Phantom Menace, and somehow even found time to perform the voice of Thrawn's bodyguard assassin Rook in several Season 4 episodes of Star Wars Rebels in 2017, and again 7 years later in 1 installment of Tales of the Empire. Whew, that's a lot. And chances are, Warwick will have played 8 more Star Wars characters before this video was even posted. But somehow, amidst all this, Warwick Davis also infiltrated the Harry Potter movies in a big way, starting with the first entry, 2001's Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, or Philosopher's Stone, depending on which side of the pond you're on. One of the characters he played in that film, whatever you call it, was everyone's favorite charms teacher, Professor Phileas Flitwick. And although Flitwick comes back in the second movie, The Chamber of Secrets, his look changed drastically starting in the third one, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Same character, new look, and we saw Flitwick again and again in Goblet of Fire, Order of the Phoenix, Half-Blood Prince, and The Deathly Hallows Part 2, although not Part 1. But not to worry, Warwick did appear in Deathly Hallows Part 1, but in a different role. In fact, in both Deathly Hallows movies, he played Grip Hook, the goblin who helps and then betrays Harry. Warwick had earlier performed Grip Hook's voice in the first film, The Sorcerer's Stone, and in the same movie played the goblin who worked as the teller at Gringotts Bank. And as it turns out, Warwick Davis wasn't the only actor of smaller stature to play multiple parts in both Star Wars and Harry Potter. Paul Grant, for instance, played an Ewok in Return of the Jedi and a goblin in Sorcerer's Stone. But then there's the special case of Rusty Goff. Rusty played goblins in 5 Potter films: Sorcerer's Stone, Prisoner of Azkaban, Order of the Phoenix, Half-Blood Prince, and Deathly Hallows Part 2. But long before Potter, Rusty Goff had the distinction of playing at least 3 characters in the very first Star Wars movie, 1977's Episode 4, A New Hope, and they're all amazing. Goff was Kabe, this adorable alien in the Mos Eisley Cantina. He also played a Jawa and one of the most iconic droids in the Star Wars universe, Power Droid, also known as Gonk. Add in the fact that Rusty Goff also played an Oompa Loompa in the original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and you have the makings of one of the greatest resumes in film history. On the opposite side of the size spectrum, we've got Ian White. In Star Wars, White embodied Bali Prindell and Rudown in The Force Awakens, Moroff in Rogue One, and Vetch on Season 1 of Andor, along with behind-the-scenes stunt and puppeteering work in several other Star Wars films. Meanwhile, in the wizarding world, Ian White served as the body double for the giant Beauxbaton's headmistress, Madame Maxime, in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire.
Blimey, that's one big woman.
And did stunts for that film plus Deathly Hallows Part 1. Of course, a big force behind the scenes of both sagas is Industrial Light and Magic, also known as ILM, the special effects company George Lucas founded to work on the original Star Wars, and which quickly became one of the top FX houses in the industry, working on all the Star Wars films and shows and the Harry Potter films. That means that surely there are dozens, even hundreds of behind-the-scenes visual effects artists who've worked on both Star Wars and Harry Potter. But we'll take a moment to single out one. That's because Paul Giacopo not only was creature supervisor for Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, and filled different roles behind the scenes on many Star Wars projects, but he's also one of the few effects artists who's made his mark as a writer, having written 4 episodes for Season 1 of Star Wars Resistance. And when we talk about behind the scenes, it's kind of cool to remember where so many of those scenes were shot, and what was behind them, literally. Just outside central London, this was Leavesden Studios. It used to be a British aircraft factory dating back to World War II, but its cavernous warehouses made perfect sound stages for epic productions, and that's where most of The Phantom Menace was shot in the late 90s. Soon after that, Warner Brothers leased and then purchased Leavesden, renaming it Warner Brothers Studios Leavesden, and shot all 8 Harry Potter and 3 Fantastic Beasts films there. So if Hogwarts and the Naboo Palace give off similar vibes, now you know why. Finally, we've saved one of the biggest and best connections for last. John Williams, the most celebrated film music composer perhaps of all time. Williams composed and conducted every note of music for all 9 of the main Star Wars movies, beginning with the original in 1977. Every iconic theme from Star Wars, from the Imperial March to Duel of the Fates and beyond, was written by John Williams, and his themes have been used in pretty much every other Star Wars project since. It all culminated in John Williams' first on-screen Star Wars cameo, playing Babu Frick's buddy Oma Tress in The Rise of Skywalker. But in between Episode 1 and Episode 9, John Williams, whose resume would fill a whole other video and truly blow your mind, look it up, also composed the music for the first 3 Harry Potter movies, and his composition Hedwig's theme has become universally associated with the wizarding world. It's the music of John Williams that binds Star Wars and Harry Potter most closely together, because his music gives both sagas an epic sweep that truly elevates them to classic status. From Ewoks and goblins to ghosts and Anzellans, wizards and inquisitors, generals and spiders, Star Wars and Harry Potter will always be connected. Call it the Force, call it magic, but we call it Star Wars Connections.